Welcome to The Mystery, a series of conversations on the mystery of life as ceremony with Ioana Maria Ilutz of The Gentle Healing Way and Melanie Niederskjöld of Sanctor Cree. Our intention for this podcast is to bring light into dark spaces in these dark times, to sit with the tender places within us as individuals and in the collective. We're bringing our hearts together with the intention to speak into what needs to be addressed. We intend to do it as gently as possible, and along the way you can certainly expect giggles and rants and everything in between. We're striving to bring some common sense into the spirituality world, the murkiness, the confusion, the chaos of it all. And we want to bring the right questions that help promote safety so that people can find the right paths, the right teachers for themselves, and have good guides of what questions to ask when and how. This podcast is intended for people who are in the early days of their spiritual awakening, and equally other walkers on the way alike, whether you've been doing this for a few months or a few years. You are welcome here, and thank you for bringing your heart to this space. So welcome to The Mystery. Our next episode is about to begin.
Hello everybody, welcome to a new episode of Welcome to the Mystery. This is your host, Ioana Maria Ilutz. I am very happy to be here today. I am very happy to be recording this episode. I am flying solo today. Melanie is taking some summertime off, but I'm a little bit on fire, so I wanted to come on here and share a few things for this episode. I'm actually after a full day of working, after like 3 clients, a really long day, but I'm so delighted to be here. And because I was buzzing and because I was in the energy, I really wanted to record this episode because it is something that has come up today while working, and it just feels very important to share, especially for the ones of you who are struggling on this path or who may be scared to embark on this spiritual journey. For those of you who maybe feel like you don't have much of a choice, but it's a really scary thing to do. So I wanted to come on here today and talk a little bit about how to walk this in a safe way as much as possible. And I want to talk a little bit about that border between when we let go and when we accept, and those times when we have to take action. Because this is one of the things that were a little bit hard in my own life, especially the first, 10 times, I suppose. But then I always see that as a lot of people I work with or I know, they struggle with it. So one of the things that comes up a lot in sessions or when working with people, and especially today was a day when this came up a few times, and that was one of the reasons why I decided to come on here and talk about it, is this matter of I feel like there is more to my life. I feel like there is more to my life that I want to share, that there is more to my work, that there is something in my life that is missing. How do I deal with that? What do I do with it? And where do I start? And this is something that many people struggle with in this day and age. So here are a few pointers for whatever is worth. One of the things that I always start with is anchoring back into your body. When we anchor into our bodies, when we become aware of our body's cues and signals, of our body's yeses and of our body's no's, things become a little bit smoother in life, in the sense of they're almost like landmarks. Like when we know how it feels in our body, when it's a yes, when it's a go for it, do this, and sometimes as simple as eat this, or when it's a no, don't go there, don't meet that person, don't go into that situation. So when we have these clear yeses and nos in our body, Like, this is where a lot of the magic starts. And yes, this is something that is not easy, especially when we're dealing with people who are coming from a background of trauma. Because what trauma does is it takes us out of our bodies. It makes us dissociate many times. So then, for many people who come from a very traumatic background, this is something that's extremely hard to do. Like, many people say, oh yeah, just go back to your body. But it's not as easy as that. There are some people out there, and I just want to say, I see you and I feel you, who are having a crazy hard time just being in their bodies, because being in their bodies is much too painful and much too much. And it's really, really, really uncomfortable. So, especially for people with these kinds of backgrounds or reactions or relationship to the presence in the body, I say take it very, very, very gently. Ease into it. You are doing nothing wrong. If things are rough, if today is not a good day to be in your body, that's okay. Because the sun always comes up. There is another day. And maybe, just maybe, tomorrow might be a little bit better. But so when we talk about being in our bodies, when we talk about having these spiritual callings, when we talk about all these things, like, many people start with the end, or they start with the middle, instead of starting with these basics of going, okay, what are my yeses? What are my nos? Where are my triggers in my life? Of course, there are always new triggers that come up. But where are those main triggers? What brings them out? What type of people bring them out? What type of situations bring them out? What kind of environments bring them out? So these things are essential and to know when we embark on the spiritual journey, and when we have this calling and this, an awakening, because they're going to be the ones that we always are able to come back to when things get too much, when the input gets too much, when the spirit world can be too loud. When all these things happen, this is our solace. One of the things that I was taught in ceremony was that the body is really the only thing that we own on this earth. Everything else is something, we acquire. But our body, this is the one thing that is attached to our soul, to our spirit, for this particular lifetime. So then this is where we always come back to. This is the beginning. This is where it all starts. So let's say I have this calling. I feel called to do something. I feel called to do something more. I feel called to take a next step. Where do I begin? So I say, okay, what are your yeses? What are your nos? What are your triggers? And on top of this, where are the places, like the actual places in nature, in the world, on the planet, where you feel the most alive, where you feel the most centered, where you feel the most at home, where you feel the most at peace. Now, this is where it's very, very, very different for many of us. There are some people who thrive in the forest. There are some people who find that peace, who find that sense of being centered in the mountains. There are some people who find it by the water, some by the creeks, some by the ocean, some by the sea, some in the plains, and some, and this is really interesting, some find those places in busy spaces with a lot of people in the middle of the city. I have met people like that who are of most service and the most at peace, it's a paradox, but when they are surrounded by a lot of people, even in big buzzing cities that are noisy and are full of input. Like for me, this would be probably a piece of hell, because sensory overload is a big thing in my life. But I have seen people who thrive in these environments. So anytime when somebody bashes the city life or cities and we vilify them, we vilify towns, we vilify cities, we vilify capitals, it's not as easy as that, because there are people amongst us whose work is precisely in those places and who thrive precisely in those places. So finding the place where you hear your soul the most, finding your place where you feel like your soul is on fire, finding the place where your creativity juices spark, this is fundamental and this is essential before you embark in this journey, right? So we have the body, we have our awareness, our triggers, we have the place where we thrive, right? And you can really, there are some very, very simple ways to find this out. It's by trial and error. You go in the woods and you see how you feel. You go by the ocean, you see how you feel. And then you just try these places until you find that place where your soul feels really at home and anchored and alive. And like any kind of exercise in this world, you do more of that. You stay there longer. You spend more time there. You allow those places to recharge you, and you allow yourself to give of yourself to those places, because it's always an exchange. We were talking about this in one of our earlier episodes. So that is a very important thing to know. Where are the places where I thrive? And sometimes it gets even more interesting than that. Sometimes there are places where you find peace and solace. And sometimes some places are meant for creativity and action. So there are a lot of ways to explore this. There are a lot of ways you can go on this journey of exploration of where do I feel at home? Because this, where does my soul feel at home? Because this is going to be something that is going to be very, very important in the madness, right? In the mystery, when sometimes things don't make sense anymore. That's where you withdraw. That's where you go back. That's where you take solace. So this is one thing that's very important. And then if you have the location, if your body is more or less on board, you say, if you know yourself, you can say, okay, right. And consciously, this is the place where many, many people struggle. One of the things that I see a lot in the world is the yes, but phenomenon, where people go, yes, I really feel like I should be doing this, but my job, and this is a completely 100% legitimate fear. It's normal, it's natural to be afraid of it, because many times, we don't know what happens when we take that leap. We don't know what happens when we sometimes let go or surrender to our gifts or to our path or to our mission in the world. It's not really something that's meant to be easy or pretty. And other times it is. Other times it's smooth and it's very clear. One of the things that I've seen over the years is that the more resistance we bring to the table, the more resistance we build up, the harder it gets in time. And also the more we postpone it. It's almost like, imagine it like this. It's like this door that periodically comes up in our lives and opens. And it says, oh, hi, I am open. Would you like to come in? and you're, yeah, no, thank you, not thank you, maybe next time. And the door goes like, it'll stay open for a while, and then go like, okay, maybe next time. And then things happen and life moves on. And then things come to a halt again, because it's usually in moments of crisis, it's usually in hard moments. And the door opens again and it says, hi, I'm open. Would you like to come in? And once again, you're like, oh no, but I'm so comfortable in this job. But I'm, like, how am I going to live? How am I going to survive? And that's absolutely okay. Again, these are completely legitimate fears. And then the door goes like, okay, well, so next time. And then the next time when it opens, things sometimes, for some people, tend to escalate a little bit more. And we were talking about this in one of our earlier episodes, how sometimes it is moments of crisis that make people embark on this journey. Sometimes it's moments of crisis where there is no more resisting. And I was having this conversation today with a client, and she was really struggling to make sense of her gifts. And, one of the things was, well, what's the point if I cannot change anything? What's the point? I've heard that a lot over the years from people who are seers, for example, who have the dreams, who have the visions, who sometimes can see the future, whether it's a global future or whether it's a personal or for family members. This is one of those gifts that is not easy to carry, because many times it can feel extremely helpless. Like life can feel a little bit lonely and a little bit helpless. And one of the things that I always hear from people who struggle with this is, well, what's the point? Sure, that's going to happen anyway. Why do I have to see this? What is the reasoning behind it? Why? And I'm always reminded by this story that this Mexican medicine man once told me. And he was saying that at some point in his life, after a really long series of ceremonies over many years, a gift opened up for him. And in this gift, he could see the date when people would pass on, when people would die. And he had a very hard time with this, especially in the beginning. And he was saying, well, what's the point? Why do I see this? I cannot change it. And it was people close to him. It was very hard. Like I can't even begin to imagine how hard it is to carry that. And then in time, he saw that indeed for the majority of people, it was just time. It was their fate. It was their journey. But then he said, in very few cases, a couple of times, it can happen that if a person makes a change, or if they decide to move their life in a different direction, or if they make a different kind of choice or something along those lines, but something quite hard to do most of the time. He said sometimes, just sometimes, this date changes. And I found this to be extremely interesting, especially since sometimes that is changeable, like that can be changed, that can be moved, and sometimes it is meant to be accepted. And one of the things that I say to people who are on this spiritual journey, or who are having a hard time letting go of control mainly, and of comfort, I do understand it. I'm a big fan of hot showers and comfort. And at the same time, I know that everything can be taken away in a heartbeat. And the more I know that, the more I enjoy it. But so one of the things on this spiritual journey, one of the things in this way of life, because it is a way of life, is this letting go of control and of trying to steer things in a certain direction. It's one of the things that I keep seeing, and I've seen this with a good number of clients and people I know over the years, is people who start from a particular career and then they embark on the spiritual journey, and then they learn, they go to all these places and they learn all these things and they learn all these techniques sometimes, and sometimes they go to university and they study and they do all these things for all those years. And then when the circle closes, when the cycle closes, they go right back into their work, into their calling, into their job that they used to have before, or that they had all this time. And sometimes they're like, oh, but this is a bit underwhelming. But then again, when they do, they will have come to that place after doing all this inner and outer journey into the world. So when they do come back, it is so rich and it is so beautiful and it is so meaningful, and the service and the way they live it and they embody it is so beautiful and inspiring that it changes not only their lives for the better, but also the lives of the people around them that they touch. And so I would like to share a little bit about my own story in this journey and how things have worked for me. I think I've mentioned that in the first episode, I think, where some of us on this journey, we get just pushed into things. So I am one of those people. The way it has been for the past probably around 20 years now of my life, since I've become so this is all I ever wanted to learn about or be in or live or experience. Like, this is the only thing that fully and absolutely makes sense for me, for my life. And I've known this since I was quite young. So one of the ways it has worked for me is that life sometimes comes and completely pushes me out of any resemblance of a comfort zone, any resemblance of familiarity sometimes. So being pushed in a completely new culture or new place, like the way I ended up in Ireland in 2019, or the way I ended up walking the Red Road and being in the Native American ceremonies. It's never something that I sought. It's never something that I woke up one morning and I said, oh, I'm going to seek out all these Native Americans that do these things because it is cool and I have knowledge to learn. No, for me in my life, these things came over me and almost didn't give me any choice but to do it, but to go there. So one of the biggest things I've had to learn over the years, and it did get easier, I think after the third time it did get a bit easier, was I had to learn acceptance. I had to learn that certain things I have absolutely no control over. And now, from my family background, I would have been raised in a way where having control was very important, because for my, ancestors, it meant survival. controlling a whole bunch of aspects of your life, and it meant survival of your family. I talked about this in last episode. So I was coming from this environment, and this is all I had. Like, this was one of my basic survival skills. Now, when I started walking the way of, the way of the mystery, the way of ceremony, like walking this way of life, one of the things that I had to give up as an offering, because there will be things that we give up as offerings. One of the things that I had to give up as an offering was this need for control and the need to understand everything that was going on. Now, that being said, I have a very strong mind. I have a very analytical mind. My mind is very happy when it can understand things. And I have had to learn that sometimes I don't. And I have had to learn to accept it and to be fully at peace there, in that place of, I don't understand what is going on. I don't understand what just happened. And it feels right. If it feels like it's the right direction, I don't understand. And it's okay. So this was one of the offerings that I struggled with for years and years. And I remember we were preparing for this sweat lodge in Germany, I think, and it was pouring down from high heavens. It was raining so hard. And I said, oh my goodness, like, all these people are here, and what are we going to do? Because, we cannot even light the fire. Like, it is pouring so hard. And then the answer was like, no, it's gonna be okay. And to my Western mind, that made no sense whatsoever. And sure enough, the time was there, and it was like, right, now we go and light the fire. And it was still raining. By the time we went down to the fire pit, it was raining a little. We lit the fire, and then the rain subsided, and then eventually it fully stopped for the entire duration of the ceremony. And then the second we were ready, the second we uncovered the lodge, it just started pouring down again. And this was the first time when I truly was taught, in a very humbling way, actually, about these things, about communication with nature, about surrender, about the fact that in this journey, sometimes things happen that have no logical explanation. They have no logical reason. And yet, they make sense. And this is another one of the essential things to keep in mind on this journey. Because sometimes, like, imagine it like this. As human beings, we have this worldview that is shaped by our experiences, right? Our life experiences, the way we grew up, the love we had or didn't have growing up at home, the trauma we went through, and the trauma our ancestors went through, and the collective trauma our people went through, and the bigger collective history of the human beings in general. So when we say, oh, this is what I see. Yes, I see this, and I think this, and all these things are the filters I see these things through. So it's really important to become acquainted with these aspects of how we view the world and how we view pretty much everything around us. And then on top of us, you consider religious conditioning and dogma and inherited belief systems and. So, when we step on this path, when we walk this journey, all these things are going to walk with us. They're going to be there because they're part of us. Our ancestors and their experiences are in our blood, literally. So it's not something we can go away from. It is, however, something that we can get acquainted with. And then sometimes when we get to that point of good and clear and heartful communication with the divine, that is the place where none of these things exist anymore. And it's usually just glimpses. Like, I find it, we would be able to call ourselves completely fortunate if we've experienced this once in our life. If we've experienced this state of being outside of religious concepts, outside of thinking of Creator, of God, as a man or a woman, or in these terms of, duality, if you will. So every now and again, we come in contact with that bliss, with that place, with the divine place beyond all these conditionings. And this place, in order to make our journeys easier to it, I suppose, it's really important that we kind of step out of Creator's way. What us human beings tend to do, and especially when we walk this path, or when we want to walk it, or when we, just when we walk it really, is we want to walk it under our terms and conditions. Keep in mind that when we walk this path with our rules, we are walking it through the lens of all the conditionings that we have. So unlearning this need for absolute control and understanding, and this need to be something or look like something, or even putting a label on what we do, or all these complete Western colonized things, we're going to be working through them when we try to control things. And in my experience, and in what I've seen with clients, and from my own life experience, this hardly ever works. And it's such a hard work. It is such a hard job maneuvering all these things. No, things need to be like this, and they should be like that, and my spiritual path should look like this, and I have to do this, and in order to be spiritual I have to do that. This is completely colonized, a corporate colonized mindset that, in all fairness, doesn't really have a place in spirituality, in walking the road of being in service. I suppose it's almost like Creator has brought us here, and we all have this little spark of the divine within us, right? And we all have different missions for the world and for our communities, and and it's almost like when we try to control things that way, it's almost like telling Creator, well, you know what, you don't know good enough, let me control this, let me take the reins, I'll show you where my spiritual path needs to go. In my experience, I have yet to see that end up in a happy place, because what happens most of the time is that we burn ourselves out, because steering the journey in the direction, and the effort, the immense effort we sometimes put into steering things into the direction we think our path should go to, it is an insane amount of energy, and it will affect our lives and the quality of our lives. So let's just put it this way. On this spiritual path, working towards gently unlearning this need for control is probably a really good idea. Also, conditioning our journey to I will do this if this and this happens. Or, oh, I only want to do this for this purpose. And sometimes it's brutal because sometimes it's about, our children or our spouses, or no, I'll serve you if you heal my mother, if you heal my father, if. If. And this is another thing that is not, in my experience at least, is not helpful, or it's not successful. Let's just put it this way. Because when we operate out of this control, like, I'm going to do this if I'm going to get this much money. I'm going to do this if it's going to look like this. If I'm going to have so many followers. If. We're completely setting ourselves up for our ego taking control. And we can completely set ourselves up for pain and misery. And for dark energies to come in and lure us with things that give us certainty. And I'm not going to say more about this in this episode, and this is not something that I like to talk about, especially not openly, especially not on my own into a mic. But this is part of what can happen. So we said, this lack of control. And I wrote it on my Instagram as well, and it's part of my bio now, this journey of decolonizing spirituality. And I find it particularly important in the Western world. I find it particularly important in Europe. I find it particularly important for all of us whose ceremonies were interrupted or altered even for a generation, right? And for many of our people in Europe, it's been the case for quite a while. And so, when we walk the spiritual path, it's really important to see how we can detach ourselves from this colonized way of thinking and of finding boxes where we are trying to squeeze everything in. And sometimes there are things that don't have a defined shape, but we'll squeeze them in a square box because that's where we think they belong. Well, newsflash, many times they don't, because they can be a square, and they can be a triangle, and they can be a sphere, they can be a circle, they can be anything. And we will never know what they are and what they aren't, and we will never know what they can be if we try to only fit them in the square box. Now, I know this is not an easy thing. This is still not easy many times for me. Many times I will struggle with, the uncertainty of modern life on planet Earth in 2024 in Ireland or in Europe in general. So I struggle with, okay, so dear Creator, how am I gonna make rent next month? Or, ooh, I have a whole bunch of bills piled up. So one of the most important things in these cases is coming back to myself, going to those places where I can hear Creator pretty much, and then going, no, it will sort itself out. I will be provided for. And somehow, thank God and all the gods, it happens. And I've experienced this, not that I've seen it, but I've experienced this so many times in my life. And every single time, I am just as humbled and I'm just as amazed. And it's beautiful that as time goes by, the fear and the panic have less and less room in my life. And of course, sometimes things happen and they're right back in their raging beauty. Because I'm human. And because, well, I think that we're all human, at least the ones who listen to this podcast. So this is one of the things that I wanted to mention. The fact that we won't always understand, that things might not always make sense, and that most certainly things on this path are not to be controlled. The other side of it, the flip side of it, is that sometimes there is a time for acceptance. Sometimes there is a time for that beautiful prayer, actually, that says, let it be your will be done, where we just look up. And I had this teacher, one of my first teachers, Barbara Grumlich, she used to say, I do my best, and then she would look up and she said, you do the rest. And this has been one of my guiding prayers for the last 17 years. So the flip side of the acceptance and the not really having control on this journey, the flip side of it is really the part where sometimes we have to take the human action, the human type of action, the type of action that says, join that course. Maybe that course will help you. Maybe that, when our guidance comes through and guides us in a direction that will bring us closer to the way we can serve best. Let's put it this way. So, and in those times, we are to follow that guidance, or that would be a good idea, to follow that guidance. And that's the human part of action. Yes, I'm going to go to this place and I am going to learn from that person, and I will go to university and I will study this and I will do that and I will create this, right? I will make that painting. I will bring that song out into the open. I will do all these things because now is the time for action. And the art is juggling these two. The art is saying, look, this is the one and this is the other. The art is knowing when we have done our best and now we completely let go of control and of where we think our path and our service should go to, and when it's time for action and for focus and for that beautiful human juiciness that puts things in motion and that is alive and that is interactive and that creates so much joy and fire and movement and amazingness. So in the spiritual world, on this path, when you embark on it, keep in mind that the art will be juggling these two aspects of it. And again, when in doubt, you go to your place and you go back to yourself and you come back to the silence and you come back to your guidance. And that's where you will find the truth or the light or the guidance or the knowing and the voice that will tell you when to act and when to accept. So, yes, this was my guidance for today, for my first flying solo episode. And I would really appreciate it if you would let me know how you felt about this and how this episode sat with you and what you would like to hear from me more. So, yes, thank you so much for listening. And welcome to the mystery, and may you be happy and healthy and wealthy and incredibly blessed in all that you do and in all of who you are. And may you be touched with light, and may you be touched with love, and may you be touched with acceptance, and may you create beauty and truth and light in this world. So I wish you all a good day, or afternoon, or morning, or night, wherever you are. And see you next time at Welcome to the Mystery.
Thank you for joining another episode of Welcome to the Mystery. If you like what you've heard and you would like to hear more and sit with us, you can find more of our work through the link tree linked below. This has access to our free community gatherings as well as our private one-to-one spaces and wider ceremony work. It's been a privilege and a pleasure to speak and share our thoughts with you today. Thank you for bringing your heart to the space, and we hope to connect with you again soon. Gurb míle buíochas libh.